Hello and welcome back to another Project Seed Money video. My name is Sharissa Bradley and I am so excited that you are here. And today I am joined by a very dear friend of mine, Kristen, who has been publishing books for the last year, as well as writing her very own book currently. So I brought her on today to discuss the process of what it means to write a book, what it feels like, the struggles, the excitement, and then also just anything you want to share as far as encouragement goes, because it is a challenging process. You've been at both, well, you've been at all of the steps, the beginning, the middle, the end, the thinking about it, all the way to like seeing a book in your hands, feeling that physical aspect of it. So let's just dive right in and I'll just introduce you briefly. Kristen, you are such an amazing woman in my life, and I'm so excited that you're here. We work together in a lot of different ways, but on one way specifically, we work in this community collaboration for publication, and that you have actually seen from very beginning, just thoughts and ideas years and years ago, all the way to now 2 publications already published. So let's start there.
Yeah, let's do it. Well, thank you so much for having me. And our relationship and the way it runs in business is so cool. Like, literally, right before we recorded this, we did a completely different business meeting. So I just feel like it's so fun to see the way we can swap around. But definitely quite the experience from beginning to end. I think that's such a fun way to even look at it. Like, you were like, you've been thinking about this for years. And I'm just like, yeah, when you really think about it, like, one of the things people tend to think about what I create is that it happens quickly. And I know that it looks like that from the outside because I'll start talking about something more publicly and then 2 weeks later it's done. But there's so much happening. And I think most creatives probably feel that way.
Oh, I
Is like
completely
there's
agree.
so much inner work, right?
I completely
Um,
agree. So the first time the publication came to your mind was like, you'd say maybe 5 years, 6 years?
yeah, I think so. I guess if we were like really taking it back, when I was 7 years old and I had two goals in my life, I wanted to be a magazine editor and a teacher. So maybe it was born back then. But then as an adult, we built out this business that we have, just working with women in a lot of different ways. And I think probably about 5 years ago, I was like, this is like one of my end of life goals, like one of those things I'm going to do when I'm an old wise woman and hanging out.
When I have nothing to do other than just write stories and collect stories. Instead, we decided to do this in our 30s when there is full life happening. And as soon as the decision was made to pull the trigger, everything sort of fell apart.
Yeah, 100%. I think, again, how many creatives probably relate to this is it's probably so many, but that feeling of like it's never the right time, but also those are the most impactful times in our lives. Publication, if you haven't read it and you're listening to this, I actually write maybe 5 pages of it, the whole thing. The rest of it we edit and create together, but it's other women writing these stories. And not one of them starts with, well, my life was perfect and then I became this. Not one of them. They're like, well, here's my hardship. Here's what I went through. Here's what I had to learn to overcome. And that's my story. So I love that you brought up that. And then everything fell apart because, like, of course it did. Because otherwise it would have been a crappy magazine.
No, but truly, everything really did crumble, and we become that kind of overused analogy of the caterpillar where everything becomes so messy and gooey and like, how are we going to get to the next point? How are we going to get to the next thing? How are we going to get it published? And then just every challenge that comes with something that you're doing that's a new project, right? If it's new, there's going to be lots of first times. And it was very new for both of us. So touch on that. Like, it's messy and challenging and rewarding.
It is all of those things. And I think what I hold on to, and I repeat these words a lot. This really wise woman said them to me. You might recognize them. She said, just follow the breadcrumbs. Just follow the breadcrumbs. And I just feel like I don't know, it probably applies to so much more than just creatives, but especially when you're in a creative process, like follow the breadcrumbs. That's all you can do is just like that messy middle, see the next thing, go pick it up. See the next thing, go pick it up. And I think that's like the biggest advice that I would have for anybody that's wants to write their story or feels overwhelmed by the thought of it is just like taking a little piece at a time, a little piece at a time, a little piece at a time.
Yeah, we cannot do this process in one day. We cannot do this process in even sometimes 5 years or more for some people. I've talked to people who said it took me 10 years to write my book. And that is not uncommon. And it's not like you're writing every single day. This is taking like 8, 10 hours of your life. It's that it comes out in the way that it comes out, which I think really leads me perfectly into talking about the book that you are writing for yourself, which will probably come out in March of 2024. If you're catching this live or if you're catching this way later down, we will have a link for you, of course. But also, tell me about this book that is coming out now, like the conception to the frustration of like, it is not coming out.
Uh, Title of the book is The Wheel of the Woman, and it's an almanac for women's well-being. And so I had this idea again, probably, I don't know, maybe 2-ish years ago, 3 for the first time. I thought it was gonna be like an oracle deck with basically the main ideas of like what I believe to be seasonal living, right? So Earth's rhythms, sun rhythms, moon rhythms, all of those things, and how it affects us as women in particular in our health. And I tried to put together like probably 12 outlines for the deck. And I have all of these outlines. They were all fine. I even put together a few of the mock ups of the cards and was playing with all of that. And it just was never quite right. In the background, I was building my blog out, so I was just writing here and there, just little bits and pieces. Some of it goes out, some of it doesn't. I think the letter of the editor of the last publication was like something I was just randomly writing. I thought it was for my book. And then I was like, no, this is just going to be a social media post. And then I was like, oh, wait, okay, no, it's the letter for the editor. So that kind of brings me to how maybe a month ago or so, I was reading one of my favorite blogs that I like to read. The woman who wrote the blog, her name's Megan Watterson. I was just going through it and I started to realize I know her books very well. I have read all of her books and I've read them so many times that I know what they say. So I'm reading the blog and I'm like, oh, I know these stories. I've read these stories and it hit me. And if you watch Mean Girls, it feels like when she says the limit does not exist, right? Because it hit me. Oh my gosh, the book is in the blog. The book is in the blog. And I just started like compiling all of these different things and changing up some wording and shifting things and putting things together and putting them in different orders and realized like most of it's here. And then I just started kind of filling the gaps. And I was giggling at some point in this conversation. You said like, it's a process that doesn't happen in a day. And it obviously doesn't, because I just explained how long it took you to do all of this, but it kind of did end up happening almost all in one day. And I did sit down for like 8 to 10 hours and just like couldn't walk away. And I was like, this is all happening right now. And I was supposed to be, you also mentioned like, oh, I'm supposed to, maybe that was before we started recording, but we've talked about how like you sit down to write the book, but then you build a website instead or whatever.
I'm going to rebrand.
I was supposed to be building a website that day, your website.
That's ironic, but awesome. And just
It's ironic. That's my song of the year.
It's so ironic. And it totally plays to the fact that like we are not in control of when that information is just going to flood to us, whether it's in that state of like, oh, this is a download, or this is like that flow state, whatever it is that you're getting yourself into. We're not really in control of it. If we were, we would spend all of our life there, right? We would live in that feeling. And it's hard to get there and it's hard to stay there. So the facts are the facts. It took years to build it. On the day that the flow happened, on the day that the download came of like, this is actually a book and the book is in the blog, it took a day. Right. But that's the tip of the iceberg. That's not really like the full understanding of like the messiness, right? What it took.
Yeah, and it brings me back to like how we started the conversation. We were talking about how like it looks like these things come out so quickly, but
Exactly.
and in some ways you could tell the story. You could tell the story in a way that it did come out really quickly, but you look out and be like, oh no, that's not
No. And healing takes place because you had to set the intention of, I am going to write a book about living seasonally. Once that intention was set, then you had to like walk the walk for the years that you were walking the walk while the blogs were being made, while the thoughts and the intentions were being put out. And then it became a book. It did not become a thought, like go from a thought to a book.
No. No, and I really like what you just said, like, you had to live it. Like, what you do, you are mostly working with people that write memoirs, and I think the thing that's so powerful about memoirs and the reason it will always be a genre that is powerful is because it's something that people already lived, and it's so much easier to understand and resonate with somebody if they're talking about something that they have already lived and been through. That's why it took so long. And what I think everybody finds when they start to pay attention to seasonal living is that they've been living that way, but there's more of an attunement that can happen when you pay attention to it and you are just aware that you're living that way and doing it intentionally.
I love that. I love the way you put that. And we just have to like recognize in the writing process that sometimes the idea will come and it will come to fruition. It's just that we're still sort of formulating the conclusion. And that looks different for everyone. For myself, I wrote one book that took 5 years, and I have been writing my second book that I'm on like year 5 or 6 on, that is like not anywhere near completion, because it is that memoir aspect. It is that like my personal story. And I feel very strongly about this. I tell people who are writing their own stories that when you write this stuff that has happened to you, you re experience those
Yeah.
things. And that cannot come out in a day. It took years and years to get to the point where you were even able to get it out of yourself in the first place. Sometimes I'll write for days, like just, oh, I got all these things to say. And then I can't even look at it for months because it's trauma and triggering and painful. And when you write those things, you kind of have to take this little bit of acceptance of like, oh, that happened. That did happen. That is real. And somebody at some point in life might repeat those words back to you as a quote that helps them. But you have to be ready to feel that back and feel if that is going to sit okay. So sometimes writing it, it's just going to take the time that it takes. It can't be done with our force.
100%. Yeah, it cannot be done with our force. My book right now, where I'm sitting on like 3 paragraphs.
Right. But it will come when it comes, and it will be so beautiful. And luckily, we do have like a timeline and a structure for that. But we also do live in the world where there has to be some flexibility. So at least we have some grace.
Yeah. I mean, we recorded a podcast together one time as a guest, and we told them, "Oh, we don't do due dates. We won't even tell you when our next publication's coming out. We don't do those."
And that is a fair thing to do. And I have had clients who will come back to me and say, you know, that date that I set? And I'll say, like, yeah, that one that was like really unrealistic, but super exciting. Let's push it like 6 more months. You know, it works. It's okay. Let's just kind of wrap up with maybe your last little bit of encouragement for other writers who are on their journey. And then lastly, just tell everybody where they can find you, the information that's coming out about your new book and the books that we've already published, Publication. So go ahead.
I feel like if you're out there and you're waiting to write, I didn't realize that there were options to be a writer and get published and be seen without becoming some giant influencer and getting a Hay House deal. I just didn't even know those were possibilities. So I think it's about like expanding your connections. And as artists, we tend to be in our bubbles. We tend to be more introverted, but it really only takes one or two really special connections. So make your community, get into your writers community. I also didn't know we have a Temecula Valley writers group, and I joined it. I haven't been to one of the meetings yet, but I have joined the group.
Step
So we're
one.
getting closer. Yeah, I think community is where it's at, right? Like if you follow you know that we've already talked about seasonal living. That's the first thing, and community care is the second thing. So definitely find your community that understands, because I also think writing can be really lonely. Actually, somebody wrote me in my inbox the other day and said, "I just saw that you were writing a book and I was wondering if you'd want to meet over coffee because writing a book is lonely." And I was like, I felt that. Like that is a lonely, and like it doesn't have to be. Like we need to have that community. So I think that's my biggest thing is like find the community, do that. And then that was a perfect way to plug myself. Hey, You can find us at mmpublication.org. We would love to help you publish your story with this group. If you're like not ready to write your whole book, take a first step, submit a submission and get that first publishing under your belt. I think for me, that really was helpful. Okay, I've done this now. I can make my book now. So mmpublication.org. And then everything else that we do, you can find us at mwomenswellness.org.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And obviously, please check out Project Seed Money if you are looking for funding to write your story. We would love to help you. We are also building a community over there of supportive people like Kristen and like other women who are trying to uplift and support female authors. So please, please check us out over there. And thank you so much for joining us on this episode. We will see you very soon. Bye.
Thank you.